This is the Jerry Doyle Show.
It doesn't seem where you turn these days that you can't find some tie-in to obesity, whether it's obesity-linked diabetes in children, obesity in a new study that is now adding $190 billion in additional medical costs, exceeding that of smoking, and even McDonald's, the target of an Olympic food fight because of McDonald's food and obesity. And everyone now getting fatter and fatter and fatter, even as we speak. Now, the question I have is, if we're getting that unhealthy, and it's happening at that rate, is there perhaps possibly maybe some miracle drug for obesity in our near future? Joining us in our present, Robert Scott Bell, homeopathic practitioner, national talk show host. Robert, welcome back.
Hey, JD, good to be with you again. And I hear also McDonald's sponsoring the Olympics. As you were talking about that, I thought of a new event that they could also sponsor called the Super Size Me event, and we can call Morgan Spurlock to participate.
There you go. I mean, I'm looking at it, and I guess people don't see the irony in the fact that McDonald's has been an official Olympic sponsor since 1976. That gets lost on the conversation. Whether they should be or shouldn't be, to me, is a different conversation. But now, all of a sudden, McDonald's is taking heat from Britain's Academy of Medical Royal College because obesity is something that people seem to be pushing, and in the push for obesity, I'm just thinking everyone's pushing it, and there's got to be a reason. Is the reason that there's some new wonder drug right around the corner that's going to be there to provide us with some solution?
Well, you know, the thing is, I'm looking for that, too, because usually there's something that's just waiting around the corner. In this case, I don't see it because a lot of the studies coming out, in fact, there was one I just covered the other day, I think you might have mentioned it as well, where they're looking at a double dose, if you will, of diabetes drugs for kids, even though most of these diabetes drugs were never tested on kids because so few kids used to have diabetes. That's why it used to be called adult onset, and then they switched the name to type 2. Because then it'd be more acceptable when your little kid gets it. Wait, my kid's not an adult yet. So what they've done is, in addition to metformin, they tried to test out this Avandia, which has a really horrible track record of side effects with cardiovascular events, heart attacks, strokes, and such, as well as liver toxicity issues. And so they admit that they actually are failing miserably at dealing with this treatment, so to speak, of disease. Of course, you bring me on because I tend not to want to treat disease. I tend to want to get people well and really get to the heart of it. But they're so lost that they're utilizing like terminology, like this doctor in this study, a Dr. Nathan here I see at Massachusetts General. He says it's really got a hold on them, as if they're possessed with diabetes. I mean, I look at this language and I say, how mystified are these doctors when they say it's got a hold on you, as if we need to get some kind of exorcism going, as opposed to looking at their diets and shifting it generally for wellness as opposed to treatment of disease for which they can't treat.
New York Times headline, obesity-linked diabetes in children resists treatments. They say the disease progresses more rapidly in kids than in adults, harder to treat. And before the 1990s, this form of diabetes was hardly ever seen in children. And even though they say not yet common, the increase in this is troubling. So what was different before 1990? Was there anything different before 1990? And what's different now with regard to this obesity-linked diabetes in kids?
Well, we're definitely seeing a downturn in the quality of food since the 90s. We've seen an increase in reliance on genetic modifications in the food supply with unknown, and I say that because they really haven't studied extensively how these things are impacting, because if you realize, you know, all the corn, high fructose corn syrup that was added, used to be there was sugar in soda, now it's the high fructose corn syrup, which is also modified, and there's so much more of this on a, let's say, a generational decline, so that it isn't just the kids now that were the kids then. Now they're becoming the adults or parents now, and they were raised increasingly on food that was devoid of those vitamins, minerals, or trace minerals. Particularly, we've talked about extensively the glucose tolerance factor form of chromium that is ripped out of the sugar molecules that are refined, not present in high fructose corn syrup. So there's no ability for these kids to transfer sugars into and out of the cells in their diet, which there's so much of the refined carbohydrates, which, by the way, the dietitians, which have a monopoly in many states, the dietetics boards, they've licensed not nutritionists, but dietitians, they actually are on record because they're funded by like PepsiCo and Nestle and these big corporations that really rely on selling lots of sugar-free, sweetened, carbohydrate-laced drinks and fast foods or junk foods. They actually say that it's okay to eat these refined carbohydrates in quote-unquote moderation. But there's no such thing as moderation when you've got no minerals in your system.
Right. Well, I think there's a big distinction between what you said just a couple of minutes ago, Robert, and that is most people are looking to treat disease. You're looking to get people healthy. Does there have to be a paradigm shift in the way people think about and approach, more so, I guess, individually than relying on these big government agencies to oversee us and protect us, to get people healthy? To avoid having to treat disease, I think would be a really important way for people to be more in control of their health, present and future.
Yeah, but when prevention is looked at as, let's say, X-ray, or if it's for women, mammograms, or if it's for children, we're going to inject them with vaccines that are very controversial because of what's in the vaccine you wouldn't drink. Now you begin to look at our ideas of prevention are not nutritionally based. They're about medical interventions. They're about, well, what drug can we preemptively get you on, like a statin drug for cholesterol? Because remember, this is an obesity issue, so they always say cholesterol is a big problem here, when we know cholesterol is vitally important for protecting the brain, the nervous system, the endocrine system, the hormonal system, and all of that. In fact, it's very minimally impactful in terms of causing any type of cardiovascular disease. So their idea of prevention in that paradigm, like I said, that doctor who said it's really got a hold on them, there's a clue in the way that they're speaking. It's as if there's just some mysterious force. We don't know what it is. We can't identify it. And then if you go to a dietitian who's state-sanctioned, again, you're looking to government to say who's qualified and who isn't. And these guys and gals who are dietitians, they might be perfectly nice people, but they're trained, let's say, by books that are corrupted by industry that wants to sell you the products that are causing the problem.
Right, yeah. And then it becomes, I guess it's also a societal issue, too, where a lot of people are path of least resistance. I looked at this one person that they profiled in this New York Times story, Sarah Chernoff. She's 21 years old. She's a college senior. Type 2 diabetes she found out she had when she was 16. They said she didn't even know how to swallow a pill. But then she says, my family tends to be overweight. I crave sweets. I don't really like to exercise, and I'm also being treated for high blood pressure. I would have to think that not everyone out there is like a Sarah Chernoff, but they're trying to, again, say, well, this is low-income families, 42% incomes under $25,000, 34% below $50,000, 40% Hispanic, 33% black, poor people, minority groups, higher affected than any other group. They're trying to find ways to, I guess, give us that sympathetic scenario, that person or that group, and say, well, we have to do something about this, don't we? But yet again, these top-down governmental fixes usually don't get down to the people who really need the help. And what you're all about with homeopathic medicine and with taking control of your own health issues is about putting that empowerment in your hands and not waiting around for the medical cavalry to come to your rescue.
But look, when you talk about those subgroups or categories of people socioeconomically challenged, they're eating the cheap food. What is the cheap food? It's heavily subsidized by government. What? They actually subsidize these industries that have special access to the market, and so it cheapens the food for cost perspective, but makes it much more expensive for the people who get sick and then can't afford the medical care, and then hence people are begging for Obamacare. Now, you can look at a kid like this and say, what is this, secondhand obesity, right? You talk about secondhand smoke, third-hand smoke.
Right.
What's fourth-hand smoke? Is that when a smoker passes gas? I haven't found out what the definition is of that. But if we talk about the obesity issue, we look at the way families are eating, and they say, well, it's genetic. No, look, they're all eating the same way. Then you can expect the same thing to occur. But if they eat differently, look, their bodies develop differently. I had a guy just covered on my show recently who's just a southern guy, nice guy, who had type 2 diabetes, insulin dependent, metformin, medical drugs galore, as well as the dietitians telling him he could eat refined carbohydrates. Nothing worked for this guy. He quit them and started eating a Paleolithic diet. In other words, he was actually eating meat, but more range meat, not let's say, factory farm meat. So it wasn't that he became a vegetarian either. And he got rid of all of his weight. He started exercising. He got rid of his type 2 diabetes. He's on absolutely no drugs, no government, no medical, no dietitian intervention. He just went back to the way his ancestors ate, but clean versions of the food. But this is something that takes money out of that industry that is subsidized by government and has a monopoly, and they don't want us to know that. So they actually attacked his blog, saying that...
Oh, yeah. This is the guy in North Carolina, Cooksey or something like that was his name?
Cooksey. They went after him to say he's practicing dietetics without a license. And the guy's like, dude, I'm sharing my story. But First Amendment doesn't exist in North Carolina for nutrition, evidently.
And that's the one where he lost 45 pounds. He was in the hospital. He's off the diabetes drugs. And he puts on his website, if I remember, I am not a doctor. I'm not a dietitian. This is not medical advice. I'm merely telling you what it was that I did, and maybe you might want to take a look at it. And North Carolina went in and said, weren't they going to throw this guy in jail or something if he continued to blog?
Well, the threats was there. They could sue him, and if they found him in, basically violating the statutes on practicing dietetics, yes, he could have been fined or imprisoned. They backed off 5 days after a reporter started inquiring about it. We broadcasted it. Natural News put it out there, and they put out a letter, and they basically called Cooksey an unlicensed person. And I was thinking, dude, when's the last time Jerry Doyle, excuse me, are you licensed to be a person? I'm like, what is this? We all have to have a license for everything now. We become so nanny state oriented, it's ridiculous.
And you're all about, excuse me, Robert Scott Bell is with us on the program. His program, Monday through Friday, naturalnews.com, the website, his website, robertscottbell.com. You're about just giving people the information and saying, look, here's maybe a different way of looking at things. And this is about putting your health, future and present in your own hands, and just saying, look, there's a reason if we are obese as a nation that we are, and there's a reason that it's increasing, and there's a reason that obesity-linked diabetes in children is increasing, and maybe the answer isn't just a plethora of drugs, but maybe it's a take a look at garbage in, garbage out. What we're putting in might be exactly what's affecting what we need to take in a pill form to supposedly supplement what it is that we're not getting in food to begin with.
Yeah, and of course, all the wussified Americans that love the nanny state can still go to the government and tell them all the wrong things to do. If they want to do that, fine, but leave somebody like Steve Cooksey alone. These are the people that we should be looking to that have lived differently, and they've been down the drug road and showed the failure there. He's not speaking out against people wanting to do what they want to do, so what harm was there except to say that somebody might read that blog and not go to a dietitian? Well, whoop-de-frickin' do. They already have a monopoly. Why do they need even somebody to stop sharing their story? I mean, this is where it gets beyond the issue of greed. It becomes your profession is such a failure that you need the government to give you a monopoly just to be able to have the status to talk to people.
And you kind of did what Cooksey did, is that you were having health issues, and you decided that you were going to take it upon yourself to solve your health issues, and you did. And I guess in an extreme extrapolation of the crackdown on Cooksey in North Carolina, they could say to you at naturalnews.com, you're acting like a doctor, Robert Scott Bell, and we think we're going to have to shut you down.
Dude, I so nullified the American Medical Association and the FDA. I mean, this is like 10th Amendment on not steroids, because we don't do those here. But, the thing is, the way that I got well was simply to look at what the government sanctioned, and I did exactly opposite that which it told me to do. And, yeah, I've said this on the air, and I've written about it as well, that anybody that shares a story now, theoretically now, because the statutes for practicing medicine, the statute for practicing dietetics, so broad and vague that literally they can decide they don't like you. You've upset somebody at a church meeting that happened to be a dietitian. They complain to the board. Now you're looking at perhaps legal issues coming at you.
And they're just going to keep coming at you. But the thing we have to do is we have to keep empowered with what it is that we have in our own control to control our own medical, health, present, and future. Your future and present should include Robert Scott Bell, homeopathic practitioner, nationally syndicated talk show host. You can catch his show Monday through Friday on naturalnews.com and his website, robertscottbell.com. Thank you, Robert. Always appreciated. Stay healthy.
Thanks, JD. Appreciate it.
Take care. 800-876-4123 is the number. Stick with us here on the show. We'll be right back.
This is the Jerry Doyle Show.